Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Good morning, Hugh. Thanks for having me.
I got to tell you, the first line in your foreword is a kick in the stomach for me. I was in fourth grade, you write, when Ronald Reagan took his first oath of office, and I was proud to live in his America. That means you're in 10th grade when the body in which you serve confirmed me to be deputy director of OPM. I mean, you're in high school when I was confirmed. That makes me feel really old, Senator.
Hey, when they're nominating people to the Supreme Court that are younger than you are, like what's happening to me now, I know I'm getting old too.
There you go. There you go. Hey, very quickly, I love this book, but then again, I work for the man. I was inspired daily by him. Why did you agree to write a foreword for The Heart of a Great Nation? You're a busy guy, and we're going to talk about why, but why do this?
I think if someone asked me to summarize Ronald Reagan like in one sentence, like very briefly, I wouldn't even go into the policy. I would say Ronald Reagan was in love with the United States of America. I mean, he viewed it as a special and unique place. And I think we need to remember that today more than ever before. There is debate out there about whether America is a great country, not to mention the greatest country in human history. You see that embedded in many of the arguments and fights we're having about politics today. And even now, a lot of our young people are being taught that rather than being a great country, America's actually been a source of evil and harm and pain in the history of the world. And Reagan, in a very powerful way, came in to the presidency in the early 80s, in the aftermath of Watergate, in the aftermath of Vietnam, in the aftermath of the Jimmy Carter administration, the impotence that our nation felt after the Iran hostage crisis. And one of the first things Reagan did it wasn't the tax cuts, it wasn't the military buildup, it was restoring that sense of national confidence in how unique and special America was that I think got everything else moving. And I really think we need that today more than ever before.
You write in the foreword to The Heart of a Great Nation, I think Reagan, this is a quote from Senator Rubio, I think Reagan would join me in believing that the biggest threat to America's values today is our national divisiveness. I agree with that, Senator. I am concerned that old friends are not talking to each other. Debates that ought to simply be very strong and vibrant have become malice filled, that there is a great deal of contempt for the other side. I've never seen this. I'm 64.
Yeah, and I know that in the late 60s, and I imagine in the mid to late 1800s, that was a pretty vibrant time. Obviously, they didn't have social media and things of that nature, but politics then was rough as well. You didn't have the instant communication. But let me say this, a lot of people watched the debate the other night and said, oh, it was, I really didn't like it. I think politics follows culture, not culture following the politics. And that debate, no matter how you felt about it, I think it was a mirror that sort of showed us what we look like as a nation and as a people, in which we're all talking at each other and over each other, but not to each other. I very much think that debate perfectly captured the state of American politics and society today. And that doesn't mean you can't have passionate differences of opinion. And it doesn't mean there aren't people in American politics that need to be condemned for their views. But by and large, the vast majority of Americans just have different ideas about how to make our country better. And at the core of it is this: there is no such thing as a successful America that leaves 35 or 40% of the country not just unhappy but angry. You just can't have it. Total victory in politics in a republic ultimately leaves you with a fundamental question: what's the point of winning the right to govern if there's no country to govern after you win?
Senator, I could not agree with you more. In fact, I did a podcast with Megyn Kelly, who has launched a new one this week. Yesterday, I referred to that debate as the Red Wedding debate, and we had a chuckle over that. But it was unlike any of the debates that Megyn and I hosted in 2016. In fact, you were on the stage 4 times when I was part of the debate panel, including the last one in Miami. They were tough. I mean, these were not childhood sit around and play tag games. These were tough hammer throwing debates, but nothing like what we saw on Tuesday night. To what do you put that?
Well, I think that's where the culture has gone. I really do. I mean, I think what people have gotten used to and expect. This is how they talk. This is how people talk to each other on social media. This is how people talk to each other in the back and forth of politics every day. This is how people communicate in our country in the 21st century. It's just a fundamental fact. And so that it be reflected in the debates is not surprising to me. It's what it takes to cut through, unfortunately. And that's where we are. And I think the debates are going to reflect it. And, but ultimately, that stuff is what it is. I think the bigger challenge, of course, is the issues and the problem sets that we have and whether we can solve them. And when the debates or when the arguments over these things become an impediment to action, I think that, or when we spend a lot of time talking about the process and not the actual results, is where it really becomes detrimental. And I'm really, obviously concerned about that in a time of great crisis. The pandemic's been a great crisis, but there are greater crises that potentially loom where you've got to bring the nation together. And if people don't view themselves as fellow countrymen, you won't be able to do that no matter who the adversary is or what the crisis is.
Senator, you were a lawyer. There were 4 flashpoints in this debate I would like to review with you. The first is the former vice president refused to answer whether or not he will pack the court. This is disqualifying to me. That is a fundamentally destabilizing proposition. It will be the end of the republic if the court becomes a political football. If Nixon doesn't look at a court order to turn over the tapes, and I work for President Nixon and I admire the man, but if he doesn't say okay to a 9-0 Supreme Court, the country falls apart. We really do have a constitutional crisis. If we begin to pack the court, it is the end of the republic, and Joe Biden wouldn't answer that. Is that acceptable in your view?
It is not, and the reason why he won't answer it is because there are elements of his base that demand it. And you're absolutely right about destabilizing. I mean, where does it end? So 4 years later, a Republican wins and adds another 5 seats or 3 seats or whatever the right number is in order to tip the court back the other way. I mean, we could eventually wind up with a ridiculous number, 25, 30 people. There's not enough room in that building for them. So that just start with that. It would be absurd. It's the kind of thing you see in the third world, really. So it would. I think the reason why he won't answer the question is because if he says he won't, he's got a substantial portion of his base, both donor base and activist base, that will revolt. And if he says he would, you've got a substantial amount of the country that would revolt. So I'm not sure he can pull off another 35 days of refusing to answer that question.
The second flashpoint is, and I'm very sensitive to this, I do not believe children belong in anybody's debate. Some people on the left have used the fact against me that my child is in the Trump administration, and I always think, what a jerk to bring that up to whoever does. But Hunter Biden went with his father to China and brought back $1.7 billion. Is there a way for the Intelligence Committee, the Finance Committee, Tom Cotton mentioned it might be the Finance Committee, not the public, but one of the committees to look at Hunter Biden's tax returns just to see if they are kosher, Senator Rubio?
I think there's a way to do it. Obviously, it's difficult to do it in the midst of a political debate where it looks like it's being politicized for those purposes. But that's what the other side would argue anyways. But let me say, look, I think what is valid is if someone in public office has a relative, whether it's a child, a spouse, a cousin, who is making a bunch of money as a result of the political process, that's a legitimate question to ask. Does something improper happen here? Are you helping this person make money and so forth? And I don't think there's anything illegitimate about it. Unfortunately, when you raise those sorts of issues in the middle of such a heated contest, it kind of gets lost in the back and forth, and you'll see the allegations that it's being heavily politicized. It doesn't make it an illegitimate issue. I will say, and this is true, I'm convinced 100% that if the roles were reversed and it was a Republican nominee who had someone in their family had made this much money while they were in office without sort of credentials, there'd be all kinds of stories. They'd be all over this stuff. I mean, there is a double standard. There's no reason to ignore it. We've seen it repeatedly, and this is yet another example of that.
Now I want to turn to the issue of race. You may not recall this, but I came down very hard on President Trump when he was the nominee elect, basically, of the party when he criticized Judge Curiel. And I want nothing to do with white supremacy, with the Proud Boys. I want nothing to do with it. But I believe the president is on record at least 6 times as denouncing the Klan, white supremacists, all that is evil on the right. I believe he is right to denounce Antifa. But I believe the media will not accept yes for an answer. I honestly do not understand this, Senator Rubio. What do you make of this?
Yeah, so I think you're right about that. I mean, he has said it repeatedly and on numerous occasions, and they sort of, continue to badger the point. I would say this, and this is important to remind everybody of it. And by the way, I mean, Joe Biden wouldn't criticize Antifa or the Marxist elements that are in the street. He called them a thought. It may be a thought. I don't know what they are. I tell you, they burn things down. They don't simply want to reform the country. They want to overthrow our system of government. I think they're pretty transparent about that. And it's a mishmash of groups that are out there. But in essence, they are organized around this catchphrase that we call Antifa. because of sort of what seems to unite them over and over again. Let me add one more point about all this. It's not, look, racism and bigotry, it's not just immoral, it's un-American, literally un-American. I mean,
yes.
the core and the essence of the American identity is that we are not one people united by a common race, a common ethnicity, a common, background, a common religion. What unites us as one people is, and it's amazing, is an idea, the idea that the belief that all men are created equal because our rights come from our Creator, and we are that is what Americanism is. And anything that excludes people from that simply because of fill in the blank, their ethnicity, the color of their skin, etc., is un-American, and that's why it should be condemned.
Last question, Senator Rubio. You have been on the receiving end of debate moderators' questions. I have been on the asking end. It's a difficult job. I think it can be done well. I expect to moderate scores of debates and hundreds of interviews with people who want to succeed Donald Trump from the Republican Party over the next 4 years. I have always found it best simply not to say anything that could be interpreted as favoring one candidate or the other, to live in Switzerland. Did Chris Wallace do a good job in your view?
I thought whether he did it intentionally or not, I think he came across as partial simply because he spent more time sort of correcting the president. I imagine Chris, in his defense, would say, well, the president was the one that was interrupting, and so I had to, be firmer with him. But any time you do stuff like that, right? Any time that you step forward, I think you've got to be conscious of what the audience is watching, because it doesn't matter at that point whether you're right or wrong. Part of the audience is going to say you were really hard on him, you lectured him, and it came across. You really have to work hard at it. I'm not saying it's an easy job. I've never done it. As you said, I've only been on the other side of it. I know it's a difficult thing, but you really got to be conscious of it. And I don't think anyone's ever been asked to moderate something like the other night, so I'm not sure what to judge him against. But,
it was the red wedding debate. It was the red wedding debate. The only thing you can do is try not to be a part of the story. And that was my goal, is not to be a part of the story the next day, and I was pretty successful at that. Senator Rubio, congratulations on The Heart of a Great Nation. I found your foreword to this book about the timeless wisdom of Ronald Reagan to be itself inspiring. Thank you for joining me. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back with Senator